Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Ammons Bogus Hangout. I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. Zara?
Hi, I'm Zara Altair. I write for the web.
Terry?
Terry van Horne, SEOpros.org.
Doc?
And Doc Sheldon of Intrinsic Value SEO.
And I'm Bill Slosky of SEO by the Sea and the Director of SEO Research for Go Fish Digital. So, how long does it take for Google to process a reconsideration request?
I've never had one take more than about 10, 12 days.
Yeah.
And
I think
usually,
it's,
sometimes 3 or 4, but it's usually around a week, I guess.
I think it's how many people it gets passed on to. Meaning the first guy says, nah, I'm going to pass this along to the next guy. And you're passed around for a couple of months before they give you an answer.
I've never heard of anybody.
Have a good laugh.
I've never heard of anybody getting a 2 or more month response.
No,
I mean, certainly if they get turned down for Recon a couple times, sure, but I've never seen anybody go more than a couple of weeks to get a response of yay or nay.
Well, historically, traditionally, it took a long time for some things to get reconsidered. Like, well, I'm not sure if you were impacted by penguin.
See, but that's not actually manual, so it can take forever. I've worked on panda sites, Bill, that have never recovered. Never. Even though I went in there and chopped with a machete. I mean, removed everything. Redid the sites. No.
So it's not the same as the imposition of a manual penalty.
No, not even the same.
It's an algorithm effect.
Correct.
You're talking about panda.
Panda or penguin?
Well,
Penguin before they made it something that could be fixed after you.
Yeah, initially it was a manual action. Often.
The penguins that I worked on, I've never seen one recover. Even though I did a pretty extensive removing.
There was a tool that you had to use, the Penguin tool, which you use with your webmaster Google analysis to determine whether or not you were hit by one of those algorithmic.
And that's the only tool I recommend for looking at any Google update. The rest don't really. It's bullshit. Excuse that term.
Those are based on the timing of those updates.
Stuff. The Penguin tool works with your analytics, not a bunch of sites that somebody put up and then measures the bullshit coming off them. No thanks.
Right. It sees if you were affected on one of the dates of one of those updates.
Yeah.
And you probably just didn't have a high enough domain authority, Terry. Had to work that in there.
Yeah. No, I just found that. In fact, now when people bring Penguin to me, I just go, no thanks. I don't want to waste your money or time. Just start over. Even take the same content and move it, you're better off.
Move it where?
Move it to another domain.
I see.
A fresh one and start
so
over.
That's even better.
Yeah.
I wish William Robb were here because I know he worked on some sites.
Are you suggesting to leave the links behind, Terry?
Yeah. Nothing.
So don't redirect the old domain to the new domain.
Definitely.
No, why'd redirect the penalty?
Yeah, that doesn't.
You didn't do a very good job on the cleanup. Or that's the way I look at it. You did something. Or personally, I just believe Google has attaches a trust factor to that domain that you'll never get out. Never.
Oh, I see. All right.
It basically they see you as this will never rise, because if we allow it to rise, you will think that what you're doing is recoverable and sustainable. And
Well, and
not.
which raises the other question too. If you just lift the content, leave the links behind, go to a new domain name entirely, at what point does Google decide it's worth their machine cycles to go ahead and compare the content on this new page to their index and determine if that's what's happened, and determine that they arbitrarily, that they detect exactly what you've done? I mean, they could do that.
The penalty is not related to the content.
They're not vindictive either, Doc, thank God.
Well, if it got enough abuse and there was enough of it going on, then it would be a different story.
Yeah, but if you've left everything behind, right, and just said this content, I'm going to start over.
Yeah, I could see them putting you on a watch list. We know this guy's played games before. Let's keep a close eye on him.
Why do you think everybody has a number? Everybody has a number.
They do so much link analysis that a link analysis would red flag you if there were potential problems.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if you're
so they don't need a watch list.
Yeah, their algorithms would pick up the patterns you're using if you continue to use the same. If you're going to bother to move the content, why do what didn't work? You might as well not bother moving the content.
Well, even your internal linking, if you just move everything to a new domain, your internal linking actually shows a pattern too, which is easily recognizable. Again, if they thought it was worth their time, which is.
But you're not being penalized on the basis of your internal linking.
No, you're not being penalized, but you could be identified as.
Identified, yeah.
All these pages suddenly have appeared on a new domain. We know that this guy, let's say he was part of a PBN. We know this guy plays these kind of games. Let's kind of keep an eye on him. I do not put that, put him above that by any means. I think it's a matter of
what I'm saying is they keep an eye on everybody.
Yeah.
So why transfer the suspicion over to a new domain? Yeah. Let the algorithms run. They'll identify if they're up to something nefarious.
Certainly can, yeah.
I think they're all pretty naive too, so they wouldn't think anybody's that evil.
Dr. Evil is an SEO, huh? Okay.
You said it, not me.
Well, I guess that's possible. So, Terry, you sent us a article about Google's recent updates and their issues or problems with canonicalization.
Yeah, they're still having issues with that, and they also mentioned that there's a few issues with AMP pages now too. I think there's something up with the indexing myself.
And there's the canonicalization problems are affecting like 2%.
Yeah, that was the number that they gave last time, was less than, I think it was 0.2% of total. It was a really small number, insignificant. However, big enough that SEOs would see it for sure.
Right. If that's linked to your biggest selling product, you should be worried as a website owner.
Well, when you're starting out, you watch every client like a hawk, I found, because you're trying to learn, so you're devoting a lot more time. to watching that kind of stuff. So you pick it up a lot quicker.
If something goes wrong with one client site, it's possible the same thing's going on with other client sites.
Usually you're reproducing the same stuff in a different way. Have your techniques that you know work, or hopefully they work.
Yeah.
But there been a lot of issues. I also think that's why the update that they usually do this time of year.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're related, but it's probably why it's going to be late, because it usually happens about now.
Okay, so there was a story about dates in search results, and Google saying that often if there's a wrong date, it's something that the site owner has done. And I've experienced that. I've done that. I've written about patents that were granted or published in the European WIPO, World International International Property Office, and they include date formats that's different than the U.S. The U.S. is sort of unique. We do it wrong. Everybody else does it right.
We do everything wrong.
Got it asked backwards, don't they? They put the year first.
So if I write about a European patent, I used to use the European date format, and now I've switched that over to including the name of the month and the day of the year, the day of the date, the number of the year. So I no longer use the European format for that. When I did, Google would sometimes take the date from the patent. Even though I had a publication date that was correct, they would take the date from the patent and put that as the date of the post.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was a
So
wrong.
it's hard to say where the date comes from that they attach to a page.
They don't always know. It's like using the one tool that is supposed to help automate schema markup that Google used to have in Webmaster Tools, and like the data highlighter.
Oh, right.
And the data highlighter didn't do too well, especially if you use your robots.txt to block your JavaScript and CSS. At that point, it had no idea what the layout of your pages were. If you remove the robots.txt that was blocking JS and CS, it would do a better job, but it wasn't ever perfect. And it still has problems now.
That's why they were asking. I wondered when they started asking that you expose your JS and CSS in the admin of WordPress. You just told me why.
Yeah.
That's an easy fix, by the way. You just allow the JS and CSS files there to be.
So when you're doing local search and you put a address for a business, Google has data wrappers that can help them find addresses in a postcode format. It can identify addresses. So it's doing the same type of thing with dates on blog posts, except it doesn't always work well.
Okay. So that's why it's good to have your address in schema and your business name and everything for local for that reason. Because they're going to put that above everything else.
Back when we were in the earlier days of local search, you used to find people who had pictures of their addresses in images.
Mm-hmm.
And they wouldn't include the actual text of the addresses on their pages. So Google Local couldn't find their address, didn't know where they were located at.
Oh, wow.
And those, to properly optimize local search, you used to have to make sure the address was on the page in text. And if you fail to, Google can identify it. Not sure at this point if you can forego putting the text on pages and local will find it. But they are doing a better job of using optical character recognition to identify what text and images say.
I had a client come to me one time who was showing, he actually took a picture, took a photo of a Google map showing the location of his site. And then on the image, he typed in the address in the image. And I said, this is not good. And he says, no, yeah, but I've got it in the alt attribute. He had put his address in the alt attribute for the image. And why would you bother? Why don't you just put the text on the page, you nitwit?
Well, make it easy for yourself.
Yeah.
I don't understand the logic behind that one.
Well, neither did I.
Yeah, okay.
Nobody should.
He was just trying to be cute, I think. Yeah.
Or trying to hide his address from scrapers.
Well, if you're going to try to hide it, then just don't put it on there at all.
Yeah, don't put it on there at all.
I mean, the not reading text on images makes sense because it's computationally expensive to go around the web and try to read all the text and all the images.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not like running pictures through a scanner. It is like running pictures through a scanner, but lots and lots and lots of pictures.
Oops. Must delete. So if you have a business and you don't necessarily want to promote your physical address, do you just leave that off?
You can submit your business as an area of service business.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
In which case you don't have to provide them. You do have to provide them with your address, but you don't have to provide your address on your website.
Okay.
And that works fine. So
I don't think they display it in their results either, if you ask them not to.
yeah. So Danny Sullivan turned into a journalist for Google. He's writing articles about things like how autocomplete suggestions work. They did have information about those in their support pages, but this was really nice, flowing, well-written article.
Yep, lots of information that explains a few things.
And I suspect he'll keep on doing that. He's written a few like that recently.
Well, if anybody knows what we want to know, it's him.
He should, yeah.
I think that's why he's there.
I think he sold them on that idea, and they said, yeah, we like that.
Yeah.
Come right for us. He's been sharing stuff on Twitter that are difficult to find any more information about, like the things he did on neural matching. Had me running to the patent office and website and searching for patents that include the words neural matching. And I didn't find one. It was still worth looking, but so sometimes in the past when somebody from Google would write a blog post on a Google blog, I would take the authors' names and go to the patent office and do a search for their names, because sometimes the people who wrote the blog posts would be the people who wrote the patent about that process.
Mm.
That would seem like the best person to do it.
Yeah.
I think they figured out that I was doing that because they stopped.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Didn't want to make it easy for you, eh, Bill?
No, why make it easy? And it was smart that they stopped. They
So
made
now
it more
when they
difficult.
release a patent, I'm sure you go to the internet and check out the guys who wrote the patent, see what else they've done.
I checked their LinkedIn pages. I checked their Google Scholar pages. I do random searches. Sometimes they have their own websites and they write stuff there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I've seen you many times when you're doing your patent analyses talk about this guy is also, the guy that you just hired specialized in developing this, or this guy was also
Right.
instrumental in this and that, and sometimes it's very enlightening.
I run across a patent by Tristram Upstill, and I've looked in his LinkedIn and it says he was the head of Google Core, the Google Core algorithm. So it's worth looking at his patents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some light reading, right?
Right.
I'll just wait for your version.
Yeah, that's what I do, Terry.
I think it's an awful lot of us out here doing just exactly that. Well, let's see what Bill has to say about
What
this.
does Bill say? Right.
You just give up on the ideas of retirement ever, Bill.
No, Google's working against me. They're making them more complicated.
We'll be out in front of your place with torches and pitchforks.
I mean,
Bill's like me, never retire. Keep
So go back to how they're making it more complicated for you.
they're making it more complicated. They're using neural networks and things like that. So their ideas of describing how a patent works these days are, we're using a neural network and ta-da. It's like voodoo or witchcraft or magic.
Right. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that like
Google
they were
magic.
saying in
Yeah.
that thing that Gary Elias wrote. It's magic. Here's where they do the magic stuff. Yeah, really?
Right.
Oh,
Magic.
No, it's not Gary, it's Jerry.
God. I got another name for him, but can't be said here.
Okay, there was an article about from Search Engine Roundtable about filter boxes. So
Yeah,
what's a filter box, Terry?
Well, it enabled people to filter stuff. They give you filters. I guess it probably they chose the filters for you, right?
Yeah.
That makes it, they must be using query analysis of some sort to do that. And are finding maybe that SERP is pretty ambiguous. And that's why they have a filter.
So they're showing these filter boxes underneath a search box after you performed a query.
Right. And
So
it filters the results by, I guess, words that are missing and stuff like that.
So if you search for something like Java, they'll give you choice drink, island, software.
Yeah.
Which sort of reminds me of the old search engine Northern Lights,
Yeah.
which used to do the categories.
Right.
So essentially it's saying go down these possible rabbit holes because it's pulling out it's pulling
I
out
think they're
the
based
related
on query
text.
analysis, so
Okay.
so that
So they see what other people have searched related to that particular
like for
query,
me,
and then they bring up.
I do searches that some of the words aren't in the documents, and this figures that stuff out and gives you other filters.
So
Okay.
you're talking about the search annotations, and sometimes they'll say does not include, and then one of your query terms,
Right.
and it'll say must include that word. And you can click on that, you'll get different results.
So it was kind of a filter in it already, and
Right.
and also I use quite often the date range filter. So I know I want a code for a device or a platform that is older, and I don't want the new stuff polluting the results. I go by the dates, and that's when I realized, hey, a lot of these have dates that are, it says it's new, but it's from 2002. I'm looking for something that was written 2 months ago.
Yeah, I do the within the last week queries.
Yeah.
And I often see results from 2009, 2010 from the same sites. So I know it's something the sites are doing and not something Google's doing.
Right. And it's annoying when you're actually, those are useless results to you if they're not, if from the period that you're looking for, especially code and trying to work on an old device yourself and fix it, and you're getting all this stuff that doesn't apply.
A site like Stack Overflow can be really useful if you're doing something that involves code.
Yeah.
But if it's really old code that you're working on, it's harder to find.
Right.
So I haven't experienced filter box in any of my recent searches.
It's nobody could get it to come up, just a few people. Whenever it says it's a Google test, that means very few people are getting it.
Okay.
Usually it's people like Bill, and they're looking for specific people. They want to get their reaction to it.
It's possible Google's picked out some people it provides more tests to than others. I have a friend who she says she often is subject to tests. She gets lots of them.
Do they notify you that you're subject to the test, or they just in the
No, they don't tell you when you're one of the lab rats.
Yeah, because that would corrupt the.
Right.
That would corrupt the results, correct? That's why shortly after it shows up on Barry's site, you don't see it in the result for a while either.
So at this point in time, the filter box is something that is being tested, and it may or may not happen in the real world.
There was also a test. They were putting a dark band around the search box. I didn't even think that was newsworthy, so I didn't bother putting it in. But that's a test they would do frequently as well.
Back in the days, they were still using Google Plus. My friend who I said gets lots of tests told me that every entity name on Google Plus pages was highlighted and clickable for her.
On the cards or the name itself in somewhere?
On every Google Plus page, every mention of some type of entity,
really?
A place, a person, a business.
That would have been.
They're all clickable. Yeah.
Now I'm jealous. That would have been fun to play with, eh?
Right. So you see interesting things when you're subject to tests like that. So once again, Google doesn't tell you that you're being tested. So if you see odd things at Google, consider yourself lucky and fortunate that you're the one seeing those, and it's possible nobody else is either, or very few other people. I mean, if there are millions of searches done a day on Google, they don't need too many searches to run a test.
Right.
I don't know how many queries is it a day on Google. I thought it was in the billions.
Yeah.
It's possibly billions. So if they run a test and use 500,000 searchers,
It doesn't take long.
it's still a small percentage, right?
Yeah, I bet they use some demographics in that if they can too. Or that'd be hard for them to figure out.
It's what it's
Google Plus.
That's why you collect data like through a Google Discover or Google Plus.
Talk about that.
I don't work for Google.
That's a
There was
secret.
a lot of data on Google
Talk
Plus.
about that.
I mean, they collect lots of information. They've got location history for everybody who uses Google Maps to navigate to places
Hmm.
and other programs.
Well, especially too, everybody has, if you're logged in, they know who you are.
Yeah.
Or at least they have information about you. They may not
mean-
have your name, but they know a lot of your tendencies.
When I take a picture of the beach and Google sends me a message saying you just taken a picture of the sunset, would you like to post it to Google Maps?
Oh, no.
Right. Yeah, I guess.
Oh, no. I get one message like that and the phone will be turned off.
Yeah.
and pull the SIM out.
The other thing I get is you went to these places last month, which is
Yeah.
kind of creepy.
And I like it when I go to like a consignment shop and take a picture and Google says, would you like to share that picture of the gym you're in with us? It's like, that makes you feel good.
On Android.
They get the wrong place, right?
Is your phone Android?
It's Android, yeah.
Yeah. Think that has something to do with it?
No, I think it's Google.
It has to do with the fact that I'm using Google Maps and I gave them permission to track my location.
Oh, okay. So you've allowed them to track you for Google Maps purposes?
Yeah.
Well, at least you can go back to Google and they can tell you where you went shopping that day if you lost your keys.
Except they get vague. They get vague because sometimes they come back with, you went here. Do you want to leave a review? And it's a place I didn't go. It's maybe 4 doors down from where I went or something like that. You know.
Do you ever get requests to update your timeline?
No, I don't think I've had one of those.
Because they track where you go and they'll keep track of and they don't understand that I work at home.
Yeah, they don't understand
leave
that
the
at all.
house.
They don't understand that at all. And the other thing is that since the pandemic, I really haven't gone a lot of places, you know. So
They've assigned the label home to where I live, and they've assigned the label work to where I live. And there's no way for me to tell them that it's the same place.
They're the people that built the map. You'd think they could figure that out, wouldn't you?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that's going to become even bigger in the future. Like, there's no way there's going to be office buildings full of people anymore.
Right.
I think people
There's a-
realize they can work from home and
there's an initiative in Tennessee to get people to move there. And they're trying to attract people who work for businesses who no longer have to live in places like San Francisco.
So you can live in Tennessee where
Wow, that would be a culture. That would be a culture jump.
San
They're,
Francisco.
they're trying to sell people on the small town feel, the community feel of a place
okay.
like Tennessee. So you can live in a town, you can walk down the streets of the town and go to the local diner and go to the bar where everybody knows your name and stuff like that. Yeah.
For schools and stuff too, if you have kids, it's not really important.
I would have a
mean-
hard time adjusting from San Francisco to Tennessee.
Right, but if you can have your kids join Little League and play the local park,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, it's a different pace of life, but it's more comfortable when you're allowed to have your kids run around the streets without being
Without
by their
fear,
side
yeah,
all the
that's
time.
true. That's true.
I mean, I remember I was growing up walking to school,
Yep.
and school was about a half a mile away, but I walked every day. My parents didn't have to drive me, didn't have to walk me.
Yep. When I
I
was
didn't
in
take the
high
bus.
school was a mile away, and I walked.
We rode horseback.
Did you?
I'm serious.
So
Serious.
what
man.
when you were in school, did you hobble the horses? What did you do when you were in school? What happened with the horses?
It was only part of 1 year that we were actually able to do that. They had a corral,
Oh, they had a corral.
and
Okay.
they had a half a dozen stalls in there for the few horses that didn't play well with others.
Hmm.
They'd get a stall, and the rest of them would just loose in the corral. And sometimes in fact, there was a girl in my class who had one. She just took off. She wore bareback, so she took off halter and bridle and everything, and just let him go. And he stayed right there. And she'd walk outside and whistle. He'd come running, But no, it was just that 1 year we got to do that.
That would be nice, though.
It was cool.
Texas.
Yep, East Texas.
That'd be pretty rural part, Doc.
We're on a suburb of a town called Tyler, which is a pretty decent sized town now. But back then it was like 10,000 population.
Hmm.
Now it's probably 110
Yeah, it's like
or more. But we were out in the outskirts. In fact, I think we were outside the city limits. No longer, though. Now it's right smack dab in the middle of town. They've grown a lot. They annexed everybody.
Yeah, it's one of the changes I'm going through, having moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. I'm used to living in towns that have been around for years, many years. I live near Princeton, and you have sites that are like George Washington Park, stuff like that. Out here in California, I went to a museum and I saw the first fire engine that was in commission in Del Mar, California. It's like the first fire engine. It was during the 1930s.
Yeah. Of course, Del Mar had only been around since about 1920s.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. Exactly. There was a push in the 20s for. It was actually below Del Mar. Del Mar was kind of the top part of that. The glories of Southern California living in San Diego. So Del Mar in the 30s, yeah, that makes sense. But when I went back to Southern California in 2004 after many years away, and what used to be little tiny towns by the ocean where now these things, we were talking about it last week, I think, where, Oceanside goes back 12 miles inland, and it's still part of Oceanside. But all those little towns were by the beach. They were truly beach towns, and the railroad tracks run along kind of parallel. And and I told people when I went back, I said, people did not live on the eastern side of the tracks when I was a kid. It was too far inland. That was inland. That wasn't part of the beach.
The western side of the tracks?
They didn't live on they didn't live on the eastern side.
The eastern
They didn't
side?
live on the inland
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
side.
So, it's like now Encinitas goes all the way almost to Rancho Santa Fe, But that didn't happen then. It was all just like right here on the beach. That was what was happening. And they were little.
Yeah, you could walk a half a mile and be out in the country.
So there's a highway that goes along that area. It's Highway 101. And it's lots
historic Highway 101, which scared me because I was like, oh my God, I think this means I'm historic.
It's got old shops and diners and things like that. It's a place you can walk around and there are lots of things to see and do.
Yep. There are lots of really cool things on that highway. And the thing about it is, in the summer it's pretty awful, but the rest of the year it's a nice drive because you actually are driving along. You're driving along the coast, and so one of my favorite ways to come back from San Diego was to come back the coastway. Because freeway's always jammed. So what difference does it make how fast you're going?
Did anybody else here besides me and Terry listen to that audio interview with Jerry Ilias?
No, I didn't.
Talking about caffeine. I never heard, you may have mentioned in the notes, Terry, that apparently that he had said something about the 404 not found causing a page to get de-indexed. I listened to the thing. I did not detect that. Did he actually say that?
Somewhere in that article. I thought it was odd too. I think he let it out somewhere else. I didn't quite understand that either.
Yeah,
I didn't listen to the post. I just read that. I try and avoid anything with ILYES.
So, enlighten me. Caffeine.
It's pretty old. Long before it was actually before the Panda and Penguin updates.
Oh yeah.
There's an update from Google called the Big Daddy update, which was an infrastructure update that helped with indexing, but it didn't have the same effect as caffeine. Caffeine was likely an incremental indexing update, which meant that if you added new content to a page, Google would crawl the page, find the new content, and add it to its index of the older content. So it could, and that was referred to by Jeff Dean in one of his patents on caffeine as treadmilling. So they're treadmilling content.
So it's stacking the newer content on top of the older.
And it had a tremendous impact on the speed of Google was able to handle pages and searches and what. It was a massive update. It really, probably one of the most impactful they've done.
Yeah, so it's also just after the Jackson thing too, right?
So it sped up the amount of it sped up the amount of time between when people would add content to a page and when a query would show that content.
Right. And that was the result of parallel indexing, which was mentioned in their announcement. And besides the conversations that I had with David Harry, I didn't hear anything else about that. And that was probably the biggest thing in that announcement. and it
Yeah.
just like this over every SEO's head. Because what it meant is Google didn't have to crawl and then index it, crawled and indexed at the same time, which meant they could. I saw a 5-second turnaround on something in the results, which blew my mind. I wrote it in Google Plus and did a search for my friend, and my post was in that search 5 seconds later.
Yeah, it was a massive impact.
Wow. And now when Gary, what he let out of the bag, is that they use these protocol buffers.
And Lexer.
It blew my mind when I got onto Wikipedia, because you read the Google stuff and it was nonsense. Like, you could tell they didn't want us to know what they were doing. You go to Wikipedia and read the information there, boom, it hits you right in the face what AMP and how they're managing to do the real-time indexing. Just blew my mind when I read it.
So to bring up the ILOY word again,
or whatever.
So looking at header tags are also normalized through rendering. So
what he was saying is Google does try and put the hierarchy back into things that HTML5 takes up, which means people, if you care about Google more than the HTML5 specification, do it right.
Things like more than one H1 on a page, for instance.
yeah,
But
okay.
HTML5 says it's perfectly fine, but I put more stock of what
See,
Google.
that also, what is wrong?
HTML5 says it's okay to header one all over the place.
All over. Actually, it denotes a block more. They want to.
Oh, it denotes a block. Okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
Whereas H1, you know what its original function in HTML was? To explain what a page was about. It was supposed to be an overview.
Yeah, a page, not a section, not a paragraph, a page.
Right, a page.
Markup, not a markup thing. It had a function beyond making text larger, and no SEOs picked that up either. Well,
I thought that I must have missed some steps, because I thought that was the function of it.
it was originally, but it faded quickly.
Oh, I see.
Now they just disregard hierarchy.
Okay, I got a question for you guys. Let's say I built a page, and I can set up my formatting, my CSS to show the entire page, basically H1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, everything as Arial 12 normal, no visible difference in them whatsoever. Is Google going to frown on that? I mean, usability aside, I understand there's some
Can't
usability.
really see it. All it sees is the code. It doesn't
Well,
really see it.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think in rendering now, they do consider.
In these days of headless browsers, they're rendering the pages to identify the document object model, and they're recognizing that things are larger and smaller. Some things are headings. And they've said, I wrote a blog post recently about featured snippets and how they're scoring answers for featured snippets. One of the patents about featured snippets talks about context of those answer passages they might score, and they're identifying things like title as a root heading, and then main headings on the page are subheadings compared to the title, and if answer passage is within the content that's headed by a main heading, it also means it's headed by the title. and the combination of the title and the main heading can adjust the score of the answer snippet based on the context of the words it's within.
So I'm still curious about Doc's question because I think that's an interesting question.
So they're looking at the headers to help identify context of answers and other things too.
So
that's
that
why
even if he has, say it's header 2, it's marked header 2, but the text is normal, it's not bigger, it's not darker, it's not anything, it's still going to recognize that as header 2.
Google can read HTML elements. They know what they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my question is more, do you think that they would take a dim view of that? Would they perhaps downgrade the page any for that?
I don't think they downgrade it, but you've made it harder for them to understand the context of what's in those tags.
Now, Google ranks pages based upon a combination of factors. Some of them are query dependent factors, like what terms you're using on a page, how relevant it is for something, and some are query independent, such as whether or not they're complete sentences or short sentences, or whether or not they're within a section that has a certain header, and it's identified as a header for that section. So that query independent part might be harmed when you're making
like usability
the same
for
size.
instance, too.
Yeah.
I would. That's what I would imagine. It could be detrimental, but obviously, for the hierarchy, the straight HTML is all they need.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think they really look and say H1 is more important. Well, higher value than H2. I don't think they.
I don't think it. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it's a matter of value. I simply think that if you've got an H2 followed by an H3, then it makes sense that H3 is a subsection of the topic of H2. That's what I mean when I say hierarchy.
Yeah, and the featured snippet pattern I just mentioned with the headings, they mention a heading hierarchy, so they do include those.
Yeah, because we talked about this actually probably a year ago or something, where and Bill was talking about the hierarchy of the headers, and that. So if you have a header 3 under a header 2, that's still subcategories of the page.
And the 3 is a subcategory of the 2.
Of the 2, yeah.
Yeah. And that is in line with the typical HTML, the 3C standards.
Yeah.
Depends what version. In one earlier versions, an H2 was actually supposed to be a byline.
It's supposed to be the what, Terry?
Byline.
So a main subheading.
Yeah, that's going
Like
back
a
a ways.
subheading, correct.
That's going back.
Oh, hey, remember, I started with version 1 of HTML. So
Yeah, I think I started
these
on
kind of things that
2.
I remember, and that's why I used to get, let's say I doubted, or I was skeptical of SEOs when they would say stuff about headings and talk about the markup, and when Google could care less about the markup.
So
They
that
only
was
cared about H1, H2.
so those were the days you were doing HTML with hammer and chisel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a big rod that I started on, and then those were the good days. So that was when it was lots of fun.
It wasn't boring, was it?
No, always learning every day.
Mm-hmm.
9 to 5, one long learning experience.
I used to browse the web to find sites that I thought were interesting and look at the code and copy the code for sections, and I made a little template library.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what I used to do. Find pages that I thought were interesting and try and see if I could do the same coding. That's how you learn. There weren't books. There weren't, nothing.
No, there were no plugins.
No, there were no plugins, and a lot of times, no one even telling you. I remember when your references for SEO were 3 sites. Made it easy, and one of those was you went there if you were a spammer. I plan to do a lot more reading on that afterwards on the protocol buffer. As soon as I saw the word buffer, boom, hit me right in the face. Because all the programming with ASP, you had to work with the buffer. So
Yeah.
I knew right away what was happening as soon as I saw buffer.
Yeah, I pulled up the Wikipedia page on the Lexer as well. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But yeah, that buffer was interesting. That was new to me.
Well, it explains a lot of things.
Yeah.
Why AMP came about, for one thing. Because AMP is basically Google's own structured data. That also hit me as I was reading it, that it's basically structured data for Google.
Yeah. And it makes sense that they like JSON LD as much as they do.
Again,
Yes, I think
because
that
it's not markup, it's easily read in the head and processed.
Mm-hmm.
So have any of you tried to do anything with web stories?
I have not.
Nope.
I did. But I found WordPress kind of takes the AMP out of the AMP stories. So I'm looking to start an all AMP website.
I saw that. So that the whole everything is going to be AMP only. Is that correct?
I don't know about that because HTML will still be a part, and you still have to think about web browsers too, the display there.
They do.
But I find AMP provides a much better development environment for mobile than WordPress or anything else does.
So if all your guests come to visit you on Google's cached copy of your page on Google's server, that means you have less people actually visiting your site.
Yeah, that'll help my Azure costs too then. So maybe I'll put them all on there. Google can serve it all, and I have a development site. That's it.
Are they still
Be
stripping? Do you have any GA visibility with AMP? Because I remember early on they were stripping that.
No, it has its own. All I had to do was plug in the number and gonna check today. Yeah, it was quite simple. There's special analytics stuff for AMP. I'm sure it was a lot more complicated.
So it's Google's catch that they're visiting, but you're actually seeing numbers related to those visits.
It's on a site that, if I had 10 there in a week, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
So it's not, one of the most important sites. It's
but it still works, and you still get to see the
Yeah,
information.
and I experiment on these sites, right? It's a way to promote the good stuff, and it gives me a way to work on a different platform. But I really like the web stories format for breaking down like the kind of stuff we've been doing. That will be a series that each page will be linked to the voice and the video and the post I wrote, reference post. So I got a feeling it'll work well. Should get into those top stories eventually. Especially if I make it a news site.
So web stories are top stories. Top stories were originally only news stories,
Right.
Right.
and they broadened those to include
Yeah.
articles about topics that were in the news. But they don't. The pages they show as top stories don't have to be news sites.
Right. It also, the top stories and web stories are a big part of the new Discover portion of, I guess it's just on mobile. I haven't really looked at Discover too much. David was quite impressed with it. I know he had a client that got into it. He found good results. I think you got a lot less competition there.
It's its own optimization issues, and they're not very difficult to meet as long as you are creating content that people have an interest in.
Right. It doesn't have to be AMP now either, right? They're taking straight HTML pages as well.
Right. Right.
But I imagine they would have to be very mobile friendly.
No, it makes sense to be mobile friendly because they wouldn't want to send people to sites that weren't using Discover.
Sounds like it. I also think that the desktop is going to eventually go away. I don't know, I just have that feeling.
There are places that get concerned about people using their own device. It's bring your own device type shops aren't as common as they could be. I mean, with potential growth of remote office spaces, people don't necessarily have to use desktop computers.
Going to take some different approaches on security then for when you're giving remote connection ability to people, because that's a lot of vulnerability to introduce.
Yeah, we did tunnels.
Use VPN.
Yep, virtual private networks. We had, I think it was 60 at one time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
With my brother was working for a large real estate company, and they had machines in every one of their rental properties and whatever they were building. It was big. That gets easier and easier to do now, though, with the cloud.
Well, it's top of the hour, folks.
Mm.
So I think that's it for the show today. Thank you all for joining us. Take care. Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you. Bye now.